Hi there, Alfredo here. Today I want to show you how to use package tracking in Business Central as a license plate functionality. So license plating is a way to track and manage shipment containers or even palletized goods in a warehouse. And the functionality in Business Central is enabled on item tracking. It's essentially another tracking code that we can use for packaging only. The good thing is that package tracking can be used together with lot tracking and serial numbers. That's why it can be used in Business Central as a license plate functionality, because it's not one or the other. So you can see that in my sandbox, I created this item tracking code that says package warehouse management system. And once you enable the functionality, let me go and show you how that is. Features. In feature management, you have the option to have the actual package tracking. Where is it? Let me find it. Use tracking by package number in reservation and tracking system. And I have enabled for all users. Important, it works in reservation and entry and tracking entry. So it will essentially apply to all the entries that you specify in this part here of the item tracking code card. It shows pallet specific tracking because I'll show you how to do it. Essentially, it's package tracking, and I enabled all the functionalities except from pallet number info must exist. In your sandbox, you will see package info inbound must exist, and outbound it will say package info. The reason why you have pallets here is because of something that you can do in inventory setup. I will show you in a minute. So very important, if you use license plating to track pallets only and not containers, you don't need these two. You don't need the info to exist. You might want to use these two if you use package tracking not on pallets but on containers. And so shipment containers, you can use the same functionality. You enable the inbound info must exist and outbound info must exist so that you can track additional information about the containers. But for this exercise, I'm going to look at pallet tracking. And you can see that it shows pallet. The reason why my package tracking shows pallet, it's because in the inventory setup, I have defined, and you can see I go to here numbering. Let me see. Actually, it's in dimension. Sorry. You can see the package caption, and this is a text field that I changed to pallet. If this is empty, the page we looked at before will only show package inbound, outbound package, warehouse, sales, purchase, package. But I wanted to change the caption to pallets, and this is standard Business Central, right? No customization. It does it. And so I have the caption to pallets, and therefore I have every information about my package tracking in pallets. So next step, as the setup is done now, let's look at some examples. I'm going to create a couple of examples here. You can see that I have created 3 new items. My 50 liters oil drum, and with a package with different configuration. I have the item tracking code package warehouse that we looked at before. I also have, and this is probably for future videos, a package plus lot tracking with a specific lot and package tracking that includes lot numbers and package tracking. So you can see how we can use license plating in addition to lot tracking. So this will allow me to create one pallet and give this pallet a unique tracking code, a unique pallet number, but then I can have multiple units in this pallet tracked by lot with different lot numbers. So the two can work together. This is interesting functionality. It's not really very often used, but it's so powerful. And then of course the last one, it's an item with package and lot tracking and multiple unit of measure where the base is pieces, but we will buy and sell it in pallets. So let's look at the first one, the simplest. You can see in my item card, I have the base unit of measure, and this is it, and everything is in the base unit of measure. If you look at the purchasing, you can see the purchase unit of measure in pallets, right? And of course this one, it's redundant data, I don't need it in the multiplication in pieces, it's just pallets. So with the package tracking for the warehouse management system, let's see what happens when I receive this item. I'm going to create a purchase order for this item, and I'm going to choose my usual fabricant vendor, and I want to get my 50 liters oil drum, which is the 23rd here, 1023, because it's the simplest one, but it actually doesn't have the lot number. So let me close this one so we can see it. I will receive it in my location London, which is set up with full WMS, so we can see how it works. And because the base and the purchase unit of measure is in pallets, let's say I don't have it here, but of course it was the purchase unit of measure, therefore we're buying in pallets. Let's say I'm buying 5 pallets, all right? And a pallet of this item costs me, I don't know, £1,000. It's a very expensive oil drum, right? I have everything I need. I can release it, and then I can create a warehouse receipt because I need to go through all the process. I don't typically like creating a warehouse receipt from the purchase order. I like to create it separately because I use a different method. But again, this is for test purposes, for demo purposes, so it's fine. So I'm going to receive, you can see the base unit of measure is in pallets, the purchase is in pallets, so we are receiving pallets. So the interesting part now is that it goes in my bin, the receipt bin. If I want to post the receipt, the system throws an error because package is required. So it tells me that I need to assign a package number for this item. It would be nice if the error said pallet, because you will see it how now in the item tracking is actually a pallet tracking. But let's look at the package and let's see how we can register a number for pallet number for these 5 pallets. So as a typical item tracking, like a lot of serial numbers, I must use the item tracking lines functionality here. I click here, and now Business Central opens the page. It's called package tracking. And the interesting part now, you can see I see pallet number, specify the package number, right? Again, if you don't have that little field changed to pallet, this field will show in your sandbox, will show package number. So it's important. You see pallet number because I changed the inventory setup, which is something that I often recommend. So I have my pallet number. I can type it here, the pallet number, or I can assign a package number, right, automatically to this one. Now you can see that this shows, this creates a number for me because I set it up in the inventory setup page. I set up a specific number sequence. This can be your SSCC label, right? If you are enrolled with GS1, we're talking about advanced barcoding. You might not need it, but in case you need it, you can set up Business Central to create a proper SSCC label for you using a GS1 code. But that's something probably for a different video. This can be something that the system can create for you, or you can actually type it manually. So by default, the system will tell you that because we're receiving 5, everything is in this number, in this pallet here. However, we understand that we are buying 5 pallets, therefore each pallet must have a unique number. So if I change this number to 1, Business Central will automatically create another line and go below that one. And I can repeat the process, like assign a package, and then it will change it for me. So enter, right? I go down, and then again, the same line, process, assign package number. and I can go on and on until I get all my pallets defined. And so process, assign package number, there we go. So, and now I have item tracking 5 and on the purchase line, and order tracking is 5, therefore I have 5 pallets with all their individual number. I can close it. The data is saved, it doesn't show here. It would be nice if we to have a flag to say that, you know, 4 out of 5 or something, or item track defined 3, 5, so I can get an idea of what I'm missing. However, we now know that the 5 pallets with individual numbers are essentially created in Business Central. Now I can post a receipt. And then the system now is going to put these 5 pallets in my receipt bin, right? And create a put away. Now, normally, if we didn't have item tracking numbers, what will happen here? A quantity of 5 of this item will be received in the location in the receipt bin. However, if we look at the items now, the item list, and if I go back and look at my item, I can see that I have 5 in inventory. The quantity of 5 is created by item ledger entry when I receive my stock. Look what happens here. If we didn't have package tracking enabled, I will see one line only: purchase receipt, 1 document number, 1 item, and I will see, a quantity of 5. Instead, Business Central created 5 individual lines because of the pallet number. And this creates so many possibilities now, because now our inventory is tracked. Each pallet is tracked with a unique number, which is a sort of a serial number, but it identifies the pallet in a way. And so if I want to see also, let me see if I can find related and warehouse. If I want to see the bin content, the same happens on the warehouse entries. I have 5 in my receipt bin, but if I drill down, my warehouse entries are now split, so multiplied essentially, 1 for each pallet number. So now traceability is maintained at warehouse level, inventory level. We have unique identifiers for our pallets, right? And what happens to the warehouse activity here? What happens to the warehouse put away? Those of you who are familiar with the WMS module will know that the warehouse activities are always by tracking lines. So the put away will not show one line for 5 items, but it will show, as you see, it will show the take and place action for each of my line. You don't see it here because you might need to enable personalization to see the field. So let's go in, let's personalize this view, and let's add the field. Let's see if I have package maybe. Is this called pallet? Yes, it's called pallet because I changed the name. So I'm going to put the pallet number here, and there we go, next to the bin code. I don't have a default bin code because my location is set up so that I don't have a default bin code. You can do it. I have a blog that explains how to do it. However, here a member of the warehouse staff putting away this item can decide to put 1 pallet in each bin. However, you might have the bins that have capacity of more than 1 pallet, and therefore I can put away these 3 pallets in the same bin. But because we have the packaging enabled, each of these individual pallets for the same item in the same bin will always be segregated, or even better, tagged with a unique reference, with a unique number. And there we go. Now we're putting away our items in pallet. They can register the put away. And now if I go back on my item, I look at my item and I look at my warehouse bin content, now you can see that I have 1 pallet here, 1 pallet in the other bin, A01B, and I have 3 pallets in my B01. If I drill down my warehouse entries, I can see the individual pallets. And this works for everything. So for example, if I now want to move my item using a movement worksheet, and I want to move pallets from one bin to another, then I can use the same process. I can get bin content, and I want to get the bin content on my 50-liter oil drum, and I want to tell the system, please tell me where my items is, my name is, right? And I'm going to make it bigger here, and so it tells me, right, that I need to move these pallets from one place to another. And here in my movement worksheet, I actually have the item tracking lines. So now I can select item tracking lines here to essentially to manage. You can see I have the 3 defined by the system already. If I drill down, I can see that my 3 pallets are these 3 numbers, and these 3 numbers 2, 3, and 4 are for what I have in B01. But if I look at A01B, I have only tracking out here. It's already defined by the system, right? So if I now want to, let's say I want to delete these 2 because I don't need to move these 2, I'm perfectly fine here. I want to move these 3 from B01 and I wanted to put it into, let's say 02, for example, right? I also want, I can also change things like, for example, I don't want to move pallet number 2. I only want to put line number 3 or 4, and now I'm going to put 2 pallets. There we go. So I'm only moving 2 pallets, and I can pick the specific pallets for this one. And then I'm going to create a movement, right? And then movement is being created. If I look at my warehouse movement, I now have the warehouse movement as a warehouse movement is a warehouse activity like a warehouse put away and warehouse pick. Therefore, I can see the pallet number and see everything is ready for me, for the warehouse users. They know exactly what to do, which item to pick from which bin code, and they know that they have to pick these specific pallets. If you use handhelds like mobile warehouses, mobile warehouse devices, your users will be required to scan and to confirm the exact pallet that they're moving. So if they try to move another pallet, they will get an error, like you can't do that. This introduces a level of complexity in your warehouse operations. However, if you want to enable pallet tracking, this is what you want to do. The same works, and I'm going to register, and now everything is moved here, right? And so if I look at my inventory, again, in my related warehouse bin content, now I can see that I have 1 pallet left in B01, but the 2 that I just moved are here. Again, if I drill down, if I click here, I can see the exact pallet number that I have in my warehouse. Great for traceability. It introduces an element of complexity, right? But of course, if this is what you need, license plating to pallet to control pallet, this is perfect. The same works for sales orders and picks and shipments, so I don't need to go through it again. And I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next one, I will show you how to use pallet tracking in combination with lot tracking. And then I will introduce the next level of complexity when we have lot tracking with expiry dates and package tracking for pallets and multiple unit of measure. So we will create 1 pallet with that contains 4 or 5 different pieces, and these 4 or 5 different pieces have different lot numbers and different expiry dates. I will tell you how everything is managed in Business Central very accurately. Again, you introduce an element of complexity that for some companies might be too much, but if you want full traceability at pallet level and at item level, at a lot level, and also introduce expiry dates, Business Central can handle it, including using mobile warehouse handhelds to manage your process. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any comment or any feedback, any question. Just send me an email or find me on LinkedIn, where I'm very active. And have fun and work hard. Speak soon.